He outsources the decisions, and when things go wrong, he blames the vetting, he blames the chief of staff, he blames the cabinet secretary, he blames anyone but himself.
Proven himself nothing more than a useful idiot.
A tad fearful of the rapid increase in Islam being practiced so openly in public spaces. They fear sectarianism. They fear the rise of Islamism as a potential political force in this country. And I mean, this was a total deflection on the part of Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer was left exposed after the Trafalgar Square prayer scandal exploded into a full-blown national firestorm. Instead of confronting the outrage head-on, he doubled down on this and proved that he is completely detached from the fear, anger, and cultural anxiety boiling across Britain. A single video clip turned into a nationwide uproar, exposing every weakness in his leadership.
This clip, in my opinion, I think should worry everybody in the West. It's of a mass Muslim prayer session. This was in the middle of central London in Trafalgar Square. Have a look at this.
The footage that detonated everything showed thousands of Muslims gathered in Trafalgar Square for a mass prayer event during Ramadan, organized by the Ramadan Tent Project, with London Mayor Sadiq Khan present and praying alongside the crowd. The images spread across every platform within hours. And the reason this exploded so fast was not simply because a religious event happened in a public space. It was because of where it happened.
Now, I don't have a problem with Muslims praying. That's their right, as is Christians and Catholics. But I do have an issue with a mass display of prayer like this, because this to me appears to be an act of domination and intimidation.
Trafalgar Square is not a random patch of London concrete. It is the symbolic beating heart of the British nation. It is where the country gathers in moments of grief, triumph, and collective memory. It carries the weight of centuries. So when that footage circulated, millions of people watching were not just seeing a prayer. They were seeing a statement. And that statement hit differently depending on who you were and what you believed Britain still stands for.
So this is the post, just to remind people, Nick Timothy, the Shadow Justice Secretary, saying that basically Muslims are not welcome in our public places and shared institutions. In this case, they were breaking the fast of Ramadan. The Prime Minister says that your party has a problem with Muslims.
Shadow Justice Secretary Nick Timothy did not hold back. He posted publicly that mass ritual prayer in shared civic spaces is an act of domination. He said the Adhan, which explicitly declares the supremacy of one faith above all others, does not belong in spaces that are supposed to represent the whole nation. He called it straight from the Islamist playbook. He said Trafalgar Square belongs to every British citizen, and what happened that night should not happen again. Whether you agree with Timothy or not, his argument opened a legitimate debate about what shared national space actually means in a country with a rapidly shifting cultural landscape. That debate deserved a serious response from a serious Prime Minister.
We are in such a febrile circumstance now with the way that certain people in politics are, and we saw this sadly through the Gorton and Denton by-election, that there is a focus on faith in a way that we as a country have no history of this.
Okay.
And so
You're saying there's a febrile atmosphere. Has Nick Timothy added to that, in your view?
I have to confess, I don't think I've been contacted by any of my constituents in Lincolnshire, so I wonder.
What Britain got instead was Keir Starmer at his most calculating and his most cowardly. At Prime Minister's questions, rather than engaging the substance of why millions of people felt deeply unsettled by that footage, Starmer went straight for the moral kill shot. He stood up in Parliament and declared that the only explanation for Conservative criticism of this event was that the Tory party has a problem with Muslims. He demanded Timothy be sacked immediately. He wrapped himself in the language of tolerance and diversity and walked away looking like he had won. But outside Westminster, in the country that actually has to live with these questions every single day, that performance landed like a sledgehammer on a bruise.
And she asked me about the process and judgment on appointments. She appointed the Shadow Justice Secretary. He said last night that Muslims praying in public, including the Mayor of London, practicing his faith are not welcome. He described it as an act of domination, straight from the Islamist playbook. If we're in my team, he'd be gone. It's utterly appalling. She should denounce his comments and she should sack him.
Because here is what Starmer refused to do. He refused to acknowledge that the discomfort millions of people felt watching that footage was real. He refused to engage the question of whether Trafalgar Square, as a national symbol, should be used for large-scale, ritualized religious expression that explicitly proclaims the supremacy of one faith. He did not address it, examine it, or even admit it exists as a valid tension. He simply repackaged the entire controversy as bigotry, declared his critics prejudiced, and used the machinery of moral accusation to shut the conversation down. That is not leadership. That is a man who is terrified of the question and has learned to weaponize accusations of racism as a shield against having to answer it.
I mean, this was a total deflection on the part of Keir Starmer. He was being asked many pertinent questions by the Leader of the Opposition on his appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the United States, so he massively swerved that issue and started to go on the attack for the Shadow Justice Secretary for giving an honestly held opinion on Twitter, a total deflection.
Then came the second layer of this scandal that made everything dramatically worse. Women at this event were physically separated from men, placed behind barriers, relegated to the back rows during a public prayer event held in the center of the British capital, attended and endorsed by the Mayor of London. This is the same political class that lectures the country about gender equality every single week. These are the same politicians who would have burned any conservative event to the ground if women had been placed behind barriers and separated from men in a public square.
The Mayor of London, who took part in a widespread prayer in Trafalgar Square of Muslims. We can have a bit of a look at that now.
But because this involved a Muslim religious event during Ramadan, with Sadiq Khan front and center giving it full political endorsement, not one word came from Starmer, not one acknowledgement, not one question about whether state officials should be lending their presence to events where women are visibly treated as secondary participants. The silence from self-described progressives was total, and it was damning.
The PM defended what happened in Trafalgar Square and said that anybody that stands out and speaks against it is a bigot. Well, I'm sorry, Prime Minister. I'm sorry, the Conservative Party that let most of these people in. We are not going to surrender.
The real winner is Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Because Farage did not just criticize the event, he moved the conversation into the territory of policy and power. He called for a ban on mass public Muslim prayer gatherings at historic British sites. He described such events as an attempt to overtake and dominate the British way of life. He planted a flag, and that flag said, "Labour will manage your discomfort. Conservatives will cautiously validate it, but only Reform will actually do something about it." Right or wrong, that message is cutting through. It is landing with exactly the voters who feel that every other party is still playing by rules designed to avoid the conversation rather than have it.
Keir Starmer this entire time and throughout his premiership has tried to convince people that he's taking a principled position, whether it's on this, whether it's on Gaza, whether it's on anything to do with policy, but really he just hides behind buzzwords, doesn't he? Process, international law, I have to consult my lawyers before I get involved in anything. He doesn't make any of his own moral, ideological or strategic decisions, and that is clear for everyone to see. And
what makes this politically catastrophic for Starmer specifically is that his own record destroyed his credibility on this issue before he even opened his mouth. 5 years ago, Starmer quietly withdrew from a Ramadan tent project event because of concerns about links between its founder and a controversial organization. He made that calculation when he was trying to win over Jewish voters and hold a different coalition together. Now, with Labour bleeding Muslim support after its stance on Gaza, With independent Muslim candidates having taken seats directly from Labour at the last election, Starmer is suddenly the loudest defender of this same organization and this same event. This is a man reading polling data and performing whatever the numbers demand, and voters are not stupid. They can see it.
And I'll tell him one thing. She and I both agree that this weak man should be replaced by a strong woman.
The deeper argument underneath all of this is one that no established politician in Britain currently has the nerve to make, honestly. The question is not whether Muslims have the right to pray. They absolutely do. The question is what a shared national civic space is supposed to feel like, and who gets to decide. Should iconic national symbols like Trafalgar Square be available for any large-scale religious ceremony from any faith? Or do certain places carry a different kind of weight, a collective national identity that belongs to everyone precisely because it belongs to no single group? That is the genuine tension at the heart of this debate. It is a serious question about pluralism, about integration, about what it means to share a country. And instead of leading that conversation, Starmer ran from it at full speed while pointing at anyone who raised it and calling them a bigot.
So here we have a British Prime Minister so terrified of the Muslim vote that he's got to say to them, look at us. And he said it not once, but he said it twice a couple of days earlier. Oh, no, this attack on Iran's nothing to do with us, nothing to do with us. It is absolutely pathetic.
Britain is going through something deeper than one controversy. The country is arguing over what it is, who it belongs to, and whether its leaders still understand its emotional core. Millions look at moments like Trafalgar Square and feel something they may not fully articulate, but they cannot ignore it. They feel the country they grew up in is being managed away from them. They feel legitimate concerns are instantly rebranded as prejudice by a political class that stopped listening long ago. They feel the rules keep changing in one direction, and no one in power will admit it.
Starmer's response, as you say, has been totally pathetic. He didn't let the United States use our bases to attack in the first place. That cost us our key ally. You've got Trump now slagging Starmer off left, right and centre all of the time. I don't know if you've seen a skit.
Starmer had a chance to meet that mood head on, not to endorse every extreme reaction, but to acknowledge the tension honestly and speak with clarity. Instead, he stood in Parliament and treated public discomfort as moral failure. He looked less like a prime minister reading the country and more like a lawyer defending a system. He sounded like a man reciting institutional language while the country asked harder questions he would not touch. In a climate where trust in the establishment is already collapsing, and where voters are searching for anyone who sounds like they understand what Britain is actually going through, that kind of performance only deepens the divide.